Welcome to the GreatBase Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, episode 140. We have Lenny Schloss. I'm going to get him on the phone right away. Billie Jean High coach. Got an amazing story, a lifetime in tennis. But let's get him on the phone because it's the middle of the day and he's pressed for time. Usually we do these late at night.
Hey, Steve.
Lenny, welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. Thanks for being our guest.
Thanks for letting me be around you.
No problem. It's been great to spend time with you in the past. Let's get started because we got to get this show rolling. You love tennis. You have a background. You played all the Grand Slams.
Yeah.
We're just talking about how you had a record for the longest match played. But let's go back to the very beginning. How did you get connected to hitting tennis balls?
Well, for those parents that are listening and for those coaches that are coaching and in the passion of it, you've met me 1,000 times a day. I was a kid that was looking for a success path in a sport. I was in baseball and somebody said tennis, and I wanted to really shine. And so I was a super athlete, and I took the tennis route because my parents, and this is kind of privately, not going to everybody, my parents kind of hit a hard time. So they said, Lenny, if you want to go to college, it's going to have to be through a scholarship. And I wasn't a great student. So tennis became my ticket and my survival really to try to get to college. And so that's how I really got started, was really getting there. There's a personal note to mine, which I will share because it's kind of, this is life. My parents were so busy that they were A, good people, but probably B- in parenting. So another reason I subconsciously took tennis was it was a way to get my parents' attention because I was really good in baseball. And the truth of the matter was, even that didn't work. They were so busy that it didn't work. But that was my idea. Hey, I'm out there by myself. I'm not with a team. And so it was a way I could thrive. And they were good people, but that's something for you parents when you're thinking about it. Just keep hugging your kids.
Baltimore Orioles. So you switched your dream from the Baltimore Orioles probably. That must have been your team.
Yeah, they were. It's true.
Were you a shortstop?
I was everything. I was shortstop, pitcher, catcher. I was a superstar at the age of 12 and 11. I was playing with 15, 16-year-olds.
So you must have spent endless hours on a backboard.
Yeah, you know what, Steve, it is so true. It's so true. Again, I'm a pretty happy guy at this stage, but my sister, the only way I could get her to hit balls with me is if I could pick up balls on both sides of the court. So that didn't work very long. So I found the backboard and literally lived off of it.
And you started pretty late, right?
Yeah. Well, 13, 14, I played a little bit. 15 was, okay, what are you going to do? And that's okay. Well, I'll take tennis. At 16, 17, I was a state champion, then a regional champion at 18, no national ranking. I had a tryout at the University of Tennessee, which in those days, this was legal. You might remember a guy named Tommy Bartlett.
Yeah.
Do you remember that name?
Yeah.
Okay, Tommy was #1 men's player in the South. His legs are like tree stumps, and he could stay out there for 47 hours in 110-degree humidity and never make an error. And so he was the men's coach. And the guy that knew me and said, hey, this is a pretty good athlete. And he said, all right, bring him down. If he can beat me, I'll give him a scholarship. Because they didn't have full scholarships, and I was going to need that. And I beat him. And that became my ticket to 4 years at the University of Tennessee.
Knoxville's a pretty place.
Yeah, I mean, all I knew was tennis court and a small bit of study.
Were you there? Were you there all 4 years?
Well, actually, it was such a great student. It took me 6 years. But they were all on scholarship. I stayed and then became the assistant coach and helped recruit. And so they liked me to stick around, and I needed it to get to graduate. So that's what happened.
What'd you do in the summer?
Yeah.
The summers when you were there, you obviously played circuit.
The summers
tennis?
I went and played tournaments. Yeah, summers I was playing tournaments and come back.
So you're 77 years young. Who were some of the top? I know you were top 10 American. Who were some of the top Americans back then?
Oh gosh, Arthur, Ashe, and Gorman, and Smith, and Lutz was singles. It's hard to me. Honestly, my past thinking is so vague, I think it's at this stage the thing that I've learned the most about is not the past and the future. Even though we've got a lot to talk about that's going to come up in the future, I really don't think about it as much as most of the peers that I run into. They can tell me who they played, when they played, what the scores were. I really blocked it out for some reason. So, I do know that I had Arthur down the set in a break at the Australian, and then I realized I had Arthur down the set in the break at the Australian, and so that was interesting time to play him. I know it beat. Big win was one of our biggest wins. Was really a cool story, and it's about instincts and athletic instincts that I've gotten involved in. Excuse me. And these athletic instincts, these eye-hand coordination skills, it's a fascinating science. And I'll try to segue to that story so it makes sense to the listener. I beat Tony Roach when he was number 2 in the world in the first round at the Nationals in the United States clay courts. And at the end of the match, they asked me, and I had about 8 or 10 more wins like this, what did it feel like when you were down triple match point in the third? And I had no idea what they meant. None. Zero. I wasn't faking it. It wasn't like, you heard the story about Jack Nicklaus when the train came through and they said, did you hear the train? I said, no, I didn't. And he sank the putt to win the Masters. Those are athletic instincts that we tap into, and they're not teachable, but they actually teach you if you get out of the way and trust. If I had Steve Smith as a coach and I put my instincts in when I'm competing, I wouldn't been on this podcast. I would be number 1 in the world doing something. And so in the future, in about a few minutes, I want to share that with everybody because I think that's what's newsworthy, not me, but what I found in my discovery. So I beat him, had a bunch of other wins like that. But at the same time, Steve, as you know, I inadvertently within the next round or two would lose to somebody that was below me. And so that began a journey in which eventually I got injured and I had to get off the tour after my 3rd year. But I left the tour with this in mind, that I was a complete failure. And I pause with that because I don't think I'm alone. How I dealt with it might be different, and how other kids deal with their lack of achieving what they felt would be successful. Mine was based on the fact of mishits. And then I got all the great coaching, Steve, because I was in all the right places. Then it would last temporarily, and then I would be back on the merry-go-round, of, okay, that didn't work, but let me try this and work harder. And I don't think too many people work harder than me. Roy Emerson was, the name then, and he actually picked me to be a sparring partner, and I could keep up with him. So he would do these crazy drills where you're up and back and back and up, and he would be laughing to see how long he can last, and I lasted. So I became a good sparring partner. Unfortunately, he burned me out. He won Wimbledon, and I lost in the first round. So.
With Emerson, I was fortunate to spend time around Emerson way back when.
Yeah.
His son was probably about 16 at the time, the John Wayne Tennis Club out in California.
Yeah.
And he said that he said I had to train so hard because my strokes were so inefficient. But there's a story where he stayed up all night and playing the piano and singing and played the Wimbledon final next year. You played at a time where it was when amateur tennis was becoming pro tennis. Could you touch upon that?
Yeah, but I'm going to just finish this one story before I do that, because it's more relevant to the journey that I think we all experience in different ways. And I think not that I'm unique, but the experience is one that is unique. And so when I got injured, Steve, I'll draw it out. I went on this journey about what was wrong with me. We started some businesses and we started opening up tennis stores and about 10 years, I went to all the conferences, and I was asked to speak because I was a decent player, but I didn't have anything to speak about. And eventually, what happened was, and then I eventually on this pathway continue to search out leaders, which is how you and I cross paths. to verify what I had learned. And this is the message about athletic instincts. Every child, every athlete has eye-hand coordination instincts that are superhuman, and we used them thousands of years ago to survive, to hunt. We could catch, hit, and throw at things, and our eye-hand coordination. We were basically master professionals, far greater than we are today. So what was happening to me was at times they busted through, and I was not overthinking during the point. I was actually focusing on wherever the ball goes and going after it and trusting my instincts. And then at other times, I would have other thoughts. And this led me to what was wrong. And eventually I ended up at the Wilmer, a major eye brain institute that this man knew about me. And the story is relevant, and I'll try not to be too blabbermouth. They were actually doing some work. They could care less about athletes. They're studying the brain and dyslexia and anything that had to do with the discovery of the brain. They were leaders in the world. So what's that have to do with this conversation? Dr. Goldberg was the guy who knew me back in Baltimore. And he said, Lenny, I know what you're looking for, and I think I have your answer. I said, what's that? He said, it's all about the eye. I said, what do you mean? And he said, if you're dependent on your eye, you can have the best technique in the world. And as you know, Steve, if your eye is distracted, that signal gets broken. And we just did a study with the Baltimore Orioles leading hitter who dropped his average 50 points. There was nothing wrong with his technique, but everything was wrong with his eye and what he was thinking. And he was overthinking, and he was pulling all the images and went into it. And so I went into a huge rabbit hole for about 20 years. 9 months later, though, for the first time after that meeting, I ran into another person who was studying human athletic instincts and how their eye was naturally connected to the hand. And when you could get a Steve Smith technology built into it, you could have an amazing result in a quarter of the time because you depend on your eye to correct. When Steve's not around, and I mean this, I've seen you do miracles. I went to your academies, and you and Vic, it's why I'm honored to be here. I just wanted to share the piece that I found is the one thing that is an amazing subject is the eye and the reps that we need for the eye. So how do you put two and two together? And so the end of the story is in this walking commercial that I guess I ended up doing is the Steve Smiths of the world are dependent upon quality reps. And when they get those quality reps, there's nobody can beat their players. And what we found is a way now to get the quality reps, tie the eye into it, where 80% of the learning can be done at home on these sweet spot brain training devices. Billie Jean King's now come into it. And yes, I am doing this because we want the world to keep playing better. And you get these devices, and then this is how you can now become the best athlete with the methodologies that you guys are doing. So at the end of the day, I know this is kind of what the subject, but I wanted your permission, and that's why I asked you ahead of time if I could share about that.
Oh, no, that's great.
There is a way now with shadow swings that we can take the shadow swings and the methodologies of the coach. And Steve knows I'm not blowing smoke up his ass. I've been a fan of his for a long time. Is that it's taken this amount of years? It's over 20 years. Arthur Ashe was involved in my journey. He came on board. He coached me to, here's what you have to do. You have to open up an academy. You're going to have to prove some stats. I'll stick it with you. Gave me his personal number. He then unfortunately passed away 3 years later. The academies, we trained over 15,000 students, won the National USTA award. We had an old facility, but we made it work. And we continue to test and test and test these devices, to test the eye, to test the methodology that it could work. And then we finally created a new partnership with Billie Jean King, the second person. 11 years ago, I said, Billie Jean King, we're now ready. What do you want to do? She says, get this into the schools. We got to get these kids brain trained. We can make tennis be the ideal first sport. So now we have just formed a partnership with the USTA. I know I'm rambling, but this all makes sense, hopefully, to all of us, that the eye is a critical piece. It's one that we can now help the sport with. The shadow swings and the eye coaching systems all work together. So the best thing we now figure is we did a study of the Grand Slam winners. We said, well, what are they doing with their eyes? Where's their ball landing? And in this study, stop me anytime I go off track, please.
Oh,
in this study, we found over 100 sites over 2,000 players on court that the pros 50% of the time are only getting 50% of the potential out of their skills. 50%. The other 50%, the ball is landing off center. And we all know that means you're losing spin, accuracy, power. The ball has to land in the center to get the maximum. Pros, 50%. We also found that the pros, 90% of the time, everybody's going to say, oh yeah, pros are always on balance. 90% of the time, they're off balance. Like basketball players shooting, 3-pointers off balance, but at the point of contact, they're focused, just like you teach. Nothing breaks that. Amateurs, top to bottom, amateurs, what would you guess their sweet spot hits are? They're getting 20% solid hits, 80% miss hits off center. So the points are all last long. It's nothing to do with the methodology, nothing to do with the coach, not the player's fault, not the student's fault. It is the fault of their eye, that their eyes move. And you can see where the Grand Slam winner's eyes are, where Federer's eyes are. They're on the back side of the ball. The ball is already left. And on the rest of us, we've already shifted to that throwing sport where we now are looking to see where the ball's going. When you retrain a brain, we all could be masterful at hitting. So that's the future of what we see in sport. That's the future of what we see in the brain. It's what we're going to put into the school systems. We're already in 200 or 300. Our goal is to be, there's 130,000 schools, so there's 50 million kids, and our kids are in terrible shape. We formed a partnership with Fit America, the leading organization for kids to get fit that are just the obesity is terrible. We're out of 39 countries, we're 39th. Wow. In our kids' obesity. We can't even qualify for the military. The kids don't even go to PE because the parents say we don't want the kids to get over-exercise or diabetes or whatever it is. So we're now getting involved with the PE conferences with Shape America. And we are going to make a difference with these kids. We're going to get these devices into the school systems. So you just need 10 minutes a day to hit on them. And it refocuses the brain. We're going to use tennis as the ideal sport. So kids will be able to focus better in sport and academics. And it goes back to the 80-20, which is 80% of the skills that need to be learned can be done before they go to the court. You think of a fighter, you say, well, a fighter does 80% of the skills outside the ring on the punching bag. But so it all makes sense. But I think we've cracked the code. So Billie Jean said, yep, let's do it. And so we're in the schools. And now I'm talking to Steve Smith. And why am I doing this so obviously is we want this to get out. We're not taking the place of anything. We're adding into the fact that if you use these systems now, the way it's taken us 10 years to redevelop it and get it to where it works, we can actually train people on Zoom 10 minutes a day. They get 4 or 5 Zoom lessons. We clear their brain out. They see and think like a Grand Slam winner. Their brains are clear. They focus, and we call it the Mayo Clinic approach. So there you go, Steve. I'm going to get off my horse and then go back to your question.
Well, let me ask this to connect to your past to your future. We have people play. We're telling parents, hey, go to garage sales, buy wooden rackets, find old wooden rackets. You obviously grew up with a wooden racket, but I'm going to guess a Kramer or a Dunlop Maxply. We feel that when someone hits with a wooden racket, it helps them keep their head still and just because I think the new rackets are, what would the word be, more forgiving. What would your comment be with the old rackets?
I think there's a yes and maybe not. Yes, that less is better in terms of being able to get what you want done. You have to focus better. No, in the fact that whatever you're thinking controls what your eye's doing. So whether I'm handling a spoon racket or a Wilson racket or a Federer racket or a wooden racket, what we found is what you're thinking during contact depends on what will happen. So whether it's wood or not, I think wood adds to the benefit that I have to stay in the moment better. But what we do is we now take your thinking during the point, when the ball is moving, and we now are the first system in the world to train what you should be thinking during the point. As you mentioned to me, Jim Lair is one of our all-time leaders and the other sports psychologists. They have mastered between points. We are now the first ones to master what should my child, what is a Grand Slam winner thinking during the point that triggers his athletic instinct so his eye stays all the way through contact. And it's basically, you got to think about just hitting. Get to it, make a solid contact. Get to it, make a solid contact, and trust your instincts. If you do that, these instincts take over. And that's actually how I beat, all these players is how I wouldn't, if you had coached me, you say, Lenny, what do you think about? Did you work on that? I said, yeah, no, Steve, they were all there because evidently they were all there because all I did was run down every ball and make a solid hit. And next thing I know, the match was over. And a cute story that summed this up was when I met with Billie Jean, and I said, this is what this does. She said, do you know what my newsletter is? I said, no. I didn't do my homework. But we knew each other from the tour. She said, it's called point of contact training. It's called POC, point of contact. Everything I believed that I could do was built upon my ability to keep my eye on my side of the point of contact. Everything I did. I could never teach it. I tried to teach Martina. I tried to take the Fed Cup. I went to everybody. When I would sit in the green room before I'd walk out to Wimbledon, to the finals, or to any tournament, I had my ball. And I said, this is what I did. I looked at my side of the ball, and I said, I see you. You're my side of the ball. I don't care who I'm playing on the other side of the ball. At the end of the match, I'll determine what's on the other side of the ball. If you watch her play, you watch Federer play, you watch a Grand Slam player play, you watch Medvedev play, technique-wise are all different. Shoe sizes are all different. Racket sizes are all different. The one thing that is the same is instinctively they're on their side of the ball after contact. Tiger Woods, volleyball players. That mental component, whether it's a wood racket or not, we still have to train. We all know this. What should we be thinking when the ball is coming over? What do I think when I'm tracking? What do I think when I'm making contact? Those are the three thoughts that we train every player. For anticipation, there's a specific thought, which is simply just get ready to go. When it's coming to you, get to your best position. When you hit it, trust your instincts. And then that's it.
Billie Jean King, I was fortunate enough to see her play at Wimbledon. I know Arthur Ashe used to say, hey, the old lady's a good player. I tell kids today that, from the service line in, of course, there's Navratilova, there's others, but Billie Jean King, I mean, the players today, really men and women, they don't play that well from the service line in. Not the way she played. I mean, she was just so good. I think she was so emphatic about keeping her head still that she would even sometimes shift her head backwards. Could you touch upon, I think with Federer, people say, hey, is he looking through the strings? Could you elaborate being on the other side of the ball?
Yeah. I mean, I'm up to the third grade in expertise now in the neurological side of things. So when your ball comes within the last 3 feet, there's a switching mechanism between tracking and focusing. When the focusing begins, your eye freezes, right? And it picks up any information. It's like looking at your watch. Okay, now I'm focused. I can see whatever's right there. Or I'm going to hammer a nail. During that moment, that ball flashes through. And you see a flash of something, but you don't see anything. But you see that flash. That's the moment in which the strike ends. When I hit a nail, the hitting concept ends at contact. When I hit the ball, the hitting concept ends neurologically at contact. There is no direction of where the ball is going. So what Federer is seeing is it might look like he is turned his head backward, but is actually perfectly still. His eye has stopped. The eye fixation is at a point in time at the contact, and then it leaves. In doing that signal, that neural pathway to the hand needs, it's like the headlights, where am I going? Where am I going? Okay, there, we're going cross court. Okay, great, boom. So then you ask the question, how in the world can he hit it cross court if he doesn't look? How's the hand going to know where to go? And so that's really the more obvious question, or not the more important question that we discovered and that we teach is visualization. And the process is called Vimo, and we've patented it now. The top players in the world, right before contact, whether it's golf, soccer, baseball, or tennis, the Grand Slam winners visualize. What do they visualize? Where they're going to hit it. In the last 3 feet, the visualization kicks in, okay? And then they focus. And then transitions separates a miss hit from a solid hit, from a Grand Slam winner, from the guy he's playing. It's the more solid hits they have. So
is Vimo, is that an acronym?
Yeah, it's an acronym for visualize, hit. Well, I'll just go to that. Steve, remember you got to guide me because I'm a blabbermouth and I may not be serving you well what you want me to be doing.
You're doing great. So, you're doing great. This is fantastic.
Okay. Well, thanks for just stopping me. Vimo is our acronym for a neuropathway accelerator, meaning clear out their brain so that whatever Steve put in, whatever coach puts in, gets out on time through the hand. And if it doesn't, then Vimo clears it out. And Vimo means you visualize. This is what happens in the last 3 feet of the brain. You visualize, then you make hit. That's the instinct to hit. What's the next instinct? M. Move. In my move, you'll watch Federer. After he hits, he's not looking. He's moving. Then the fourth instinct is look. The instinct to look is last. When that L, the VHML, when that L gets nasty and it jumps up in front of the H, and I look before I hit, your instincts say, adios, you're on your own. You know, I'm not going to fix that stroke for you. But when you visualize hit, and you in golf, you go ahead and look. Okay, I hit, then I look. They don't look while they're hitting. They hit, then they look. They have strengthened the brain so much. It's like a muscle. Now I have no reason to look. Why? It's not that I'm mentally tough. I have no reason. I already see it in my mind. I see the hole. I see the cross court. It's in my mind. So now there's no reason to look. But the visualization is like a mental giant steroid steel fence compartment around your brain. Nothing can get in that split moment when you visualize where your clothes are in your closet. When you visualize anything, it occupies and it separates. One of the things that separates the human instincts from other animals is we can visualize. So we use it for all kinds of things, but Grand Slam winners, they use it to hit. So we want to promote for every coach to start using Vimo to their benefit. Visualize, then hit, then move, then look. If you visualize, hit, look, guess what all you are going to look like? You're going to visualize, you're going to hit a good shot. Most of the time it happens outside the doubles alleys. We've done so much friggin' research. Most of the time it happens when you get outside the zone. I hit a shot, I hit it good, and I look because I'm afraid. As soon as I look, I stop. Now I've left the whole court open. The Grand Slam winners, they hit, they begin their recovery back, then they look, they're back inside. So everybody can do these instinctive patterns. And when we do them for tennis, then we're going to have the coaches actually get the biggest benefit because now they can teach their players so much more than what they used to teach them. You know, it takes 3 or 4 or 5, 6 hours. How about if we can get it done where 80% of it's done, the reps are done at home on Vimo with whatever the skill is, then come back to the coach. Hey, coach, I'm ready for something else. So for me, you know, my excitement is coming through. Obviously, I benefit from this. I've spent 25, 30 years now in this side of the fence after leaving the tour feeling like what was wrong with me. And so I do believe that the future of our sport will be improved by us taking advantage of the coach's knowledge. And the way to take advantage of our coach's knowledge faster is to, Vimo, is to get 80% of the skills done in an environment in which your brain is not looking over the net. And what you and I talked about, the flyaway ball is the major neurological distraction to our eye. Federer doesn't care where the ball is flying because he sees in his mind where it's going to go. I cared too much at times, and then other times I didn't. I couldn't miss. So there you go. Another long answer to a simple question.
You're so humble about your playing background, and I can appreciate how you've gone forward, and you're not like a lot of former players are hung up on that. But let's just take a time out with, I was working for Tennis Corporation of America, I guess a CFO, someone you probably know really well, Doug Cash. He had a training session for pros. And it might have lasted 4 hours, but it was Lenny Schloss. He was about your club in Baltimore where you had like pro shop currency, monopoly money for your players. It was based on attendance records and report cards. Could you talk a little bit about, I know that certainly you were a player, and then you've been so involved with the Billie Jean coach and everything goes with that. But how about in between where you became a club owner and worked with all these players and teaching pros? Is that where you did the project with Arthur Ashe in Baltimore at the club you had?
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. The retail thing was a default. I got off the tour, went back to Baltimore. It was a big fish in a little pond. It was Pam Shriver and myself were players that had gotten out of there. And so when I came back, the natural thing was I said, let's open up a tennis store called Totally Tennis. And so that was that bought me the time for the 10, 12 years we ran that. We opened up a bunch of them. I was able to go around the country and try to figure out what was wrong with me. And then when that finished and we sold the stores, I said to my wife, I really want to figure this out and I need to start coaching to do it. So there was a country club that had always called me to say, we need another coach. We need another coach. You know how it is. You know, the pros don't last very long, and the ones that do are so special, they stay forever. So I was constantly feeding the coach. I said, I think I got one for you. I said, who's that? I said, it's me. And so I took that gig and spent about 6-7 years in the summer teaching there, continuing to figure out I changed it. I'm sorry. During that time, in the 10 years, I met in my backyard, I realized was the answer to the eye. And 9 months later was the Dr. Ahn, who is the world-class scientist who Arthur Ashe says is probably the smartest man he's ever met in sports. After he did this study of the human biology and the thumb and how our thumb separated us from all the other creatures and how we are able to do fine motor skills and grasp rackets and throw things and do things, all because of that. And our brain began to develop because of that one feature. And then it goes on and on and on. So this gentleman studied, Steve, from inside out, the human system. And I can tell you, I have more knowledge that I don't understand than ever. But this was 15 years that I stood with this and was being trained and understanding. And he speaks Chinese, so it was really hard for him to spell it out to me the way you and I are trying to spell it out. But at the end of the day, I met him, and then I said, no, I said, Arthur, what do we do with this? He says, go get a facility. And that's where Doug Cash comes in. In the meantime, our stores were pretty cool. When you came in for a racket, our people who sold rackets wore white prescription doctor's jackets and would have a pad and pencil and with a bunch of questions, you know, how long you've been playing, what are you looking for, more power and control, what you're writing. So we really did things unusually interesting way we were treating people. And if you had anything and you had it for 5 years, you could bring it back. We'd still give you the money back. So we kept it at 5%. You know, it wouldn't matter. We serviced at 95%. And if somebody were, when we opened up, we get your racket ready in 2 days, right? And somebody said, we can get it ready in 2 days. Then we went to 1 day. And then somebody said, 1 day in our neighborhood. I said, okay, we're going to go to half a day. They said half a day. Then we went to 1 hour service, and I kept a stringer there all the time. So we still kept owning that market. So we went to the tennis club, just so you can know my brain doesn't always work in order. You didn't have any money to really run a tennis club. We bought the club out of bankruptcy. I got a backer, and everything we did, we had to do self-fund. So it was doing $300,000 or $400,000 a year. It needs to do $500,000 to $600,000 a year. We did $750,000 our first year. Second year, we kept growing, and it went really big. How we got there was what I think Doug was interested in. How in the world could 6 courts in a dilapidated building that we had buckets that still leaked? You know, it was nice in certain ways. I forgot what we were doing. $125,000 a court in instruction, $150, something like that. Well beyond the average of $60,000 or $70,000. I'm not sure what all the numbers are. We were just well past it. But the biggest part was how we would do it with a 3% marketing budget. 3% marketing budget is nothing, right? That's, you know, 15, 10,000. There's nothing there for that. How do we do it? Everybody that worked there, our front desk became the biggest sales group in the country for selling. When we did $750,000 in instruction alone, a third of that was the front desk people. When you come in saying, how are you playing? And we train them to ask you how you're playing. And this is all gets back to people and communication. And they say, yeah, you heard about this new system that you can actually improve no matter what your level is in 30 minutes just by improving. It's a cardio workout that actually improves your eyes so you can hit the ball straighter and cleaner right away. It doesn't matter if you never played tennis, everything, blah, blah, blah. We had a whole training program, completely trained in it. And at the end of the day, for every 10 hours of work, and we had 30,000 hours on the front desk, 1 out of 10 signed up, and we booked 50% of them. And so the cost is ridiculously, we were making $500 an hour, 1 out of 2, and they signed up for $500, which is unheard of 30 years ago, because the system that we guaranteed them was based on balls. How many balls you will get in our program was the deciding factor. And there's a relevancy to what Vimo is. And it's a relevancy to what every coach needs the most. And number one is, if I can get my students to get enough quality reps, they'll be successful and I can help them more. We started that ancient idea there, and you would sign up for, okay, I want the 1,000 ball program. Well, that's 4 weeks. I want the 15,000 mile program. Well, that would get you up 2 levels. And we had adults levels. We started 1.0 up to 5.0, and kids levels, we started with grades. Okay, your child's in the 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. Now, a child might be 8 years old, but after 3 months, he could be instead of in the 3rd grade, he could be in 8th grade, because we accelerate the eye-hand coordination at a much faster rate than his age group, because he's going to get the 10,000 ball program or the 15. And everything was tied to money. No matter what you took, if you took a 20,000 ball program, which is about 52 weeks, you never paid more than $25 a week. Never paid more than $25 a week. And people told me I was crazy, because that would basically took about 15 months, not 12 months. That was a 12-month program. So I was at risk for 3 months. You know what my loss was? It was less than 1% on anybody, where I went out on the limb and said, okay, we're going to extend it, because we wanted to keep it $25 a month, so nobody was left not being able to afford something that we offered. So even though we're in a nice neighborhood, we had a very cross-section of kids, even Special Olympics, Down syndromes. They came in. We didn't charge them. We just did them at lunchtime where we had some open court. So there's a great, unique place. But for me and for Arthur, who started me, I could have cared less about being a successful club owner. What I cared most about was figuring this puzzle out. And so I ended up with 2 people that are now the heads of the U.S. Open, Arthur Ashe and Billie Jean King, were the ones who stuck with me. And now we're ready to launch this Vimo thing. So that's where the club was. Doug flew his team down, and they stayed with us for a weekend, walked around, followed our money. The money wasn't money, but what we did, Steve, is we had instant gratification, like the fitness center. I own a fitness center as well inside this place. And we converted that into a marketing avenue as well. So everybody that joined fitness, we gave them a cardio workout, we called it, which is our 30-minute lesson. But we didn't do as well as I thought we'd do. I thought we'd convert 50% of them, but we converted like maybe 15, 20% of them, because they were just into fitness and they didn't care about tennis. But we did at least get a conversion out of it. We had about 1,500 members in that, so that was good. So kind of lost my thought. Oh, I know what it was. Instant gratification for the coaches. We did paper, and that was every week, every lesson, a kid left with something to take home. And my daughter was in a private school, and I was getting stuff all the time, show me how. I was like, so man, look what I'm paying for. They're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this. But in tennis, the kids go home empty-handed. And what do they talk about? They don't have much to talk about because they're so brain dead. So they got coupons, and the coupons were based on improvement and attitude. And they got points for those, and they kept those points. And when they got to 500, which would be about 5 sessions, they could go in and get these prizes. And then at 1,000 prizes, and they were big prizes. I mean, they were rackets and things that were pretty expensive, So, but it became an incentive for the kids to have a good attitude. And how many points did they get? Hey, look at this! I got 100 points. How was your lesson today? They didn't talk about lesson. I got 100 points. I got 100 points. I got 50 points. For those who are listening, there's nothing better than a pat on the back when a kid, and especially in these days. And it's very hard for the kids to remember, as we know, because their attention we're fighting that attention deficit issue. more and more. And I can tell you with the PE teachers, it's a war they're losing. So we're going to help them there. So that's kind of what we did, Steve. And then monthly, what we had awards. Every month there was the leadership award. Who was the leader in improvement and attitude? And they got a certificate. And then every 2 to 3 months, if you're on a 8-week program, then it's time for you to graduate. And we knew it. Our system was based on individual, not groups. I knew every individual. Okay, November 12th, Johnny is going to be finishing up. So October 12th, we will start talking to Johnny about what he wants to do when he finishes his 10,000 ball program and rebook him. And we average about 2 years per student. On our 50%. No, that's not true. About a year and a half. Yeah, 2 years have been 100%. So if I'm making sense, they got certificates for their next level. Here it is, and the certificate say you have now achieved a 3.0 level, which is equivalent to 8th grade in school. Most of these kids will be in 5th grade. But their eye-hand coordination was that, and we had skills tests that they had to pass to get to that. So it was really legitimate, although I don't think it was scientifically as clean as we are today. It at least was legitimate, and they had to do something to achieve something. And then they would go to their certificate would go on their wall, and on it would say, for you to achieve your next level, if you're 3.0 to get to the 3.5, you will need 17,000 more balls. And then we'd sign up for 17,000 more balls. And that's what Doug liked, the incentive and the immediate gratification and the personalization of the program. And no one, not one person, and I think Doug does this now, or did do it, not one person ever of these 15,000, probably somebody did, ever got to go walk into a class, ever. They had to take a 30-minute workout, and they filled out their history sheet. So when they come onto my court, I get the history sheet. I say, oh, you went to such a high school. This is you played tennis, such and such. You're also a soccer. You also did. You had a knee injury. How's that doing? Okay. So everything was personalized, handed to the coach before you got to the court. The coach had that certificate. Had that history sheet. So he knew, and I had a lot of coaches. We had 600 coaches over the period of time. There's like 12 or so at a time. They knew the student before they walked on, knew about them, their history, because it was all done up front. So the system was personalized. 30 minutes, get on the court. Every week you take something home that, for the kids. Now for the adults it was different. We didn't do that. But we did have certificates for what you signed up for. We did know when you're on an 8 weeks, you're on 16 weeks, you're on 24 weeks, you're on the year program. We did know all of that. So when their grouping was up, it was really cool. Instead of having to sign up, we have 50, 80 students and the stress. No, we got 1 student this week. We got 3 this week. We got 4 this week that we need to make sure we pay attention to. So it was a pretty cool system. That was a long one too. Long answer, Steve.
Let me ask you. So, when did you design the Billie Jean Eye Coach? Was it during these years at the club in Baltimore? Then you actually sold the club, and everything went hook, line, and sinker into developing. Basically what you're doing today.
Pretty much that way. I think what happened in the 1990, when I met in that 1 year where the Wilmer Institute said, you got no shot if your eye's jumping. You have to figure out how to control it. And then met the scientist, Dr. Ahn, who studied the connectivity between thought and action and instincts. And during the point, when that happened, he had already designed that and patented his idea, but we didn't have the device. He just had the idea, but the idea made so much sense, and that's when I flew up with Arthur and said, well, you got to meet with us. And I did. I think I told you the story. We met with him, and for 1 hour, he said, I'll give you 1 hour. And I said, okay. Took scientists up, a couple of the other guys. Remember Ken DeHart? You know Ken DeHart, right?
Ken, yeah. Actually, his son came to spend a week with us one time.
Oh, yeah. Shit, everybody should. Anyway, we flew us up, and we said, yeah, because Ken got involved. And he said, yeah, this makes it interesting. Arthur met with an hour. I said, okay. He said, thanks, guys. I'll be right back in 5 minutes. So say goodbye. He comes back, says, cancel the rest of the day. Let's keep going. And then he gets into the science. All he cared about was the science, the history of mankind. how our humans can be, our survival instincts can be used in sport, how they can be used in academics, how they can be used to make the world a better place. And so that's really how we got this thing going. And then back to tennis, and he called John McEnroe, who had just quit, said, John, you've got to meet with these guys. And we went and met with John. Dr. On was the only person who could talk to John. He gave him the cue to strengthen his eye at contact. He felt it. This is great. His instincts were reconnected. He went back, started playing. But John went on. We never heard from him again. But it was really cool. And I was the hitting guy on the other side. And I just kept watching. The ball got heavier, Steve, and heavier and heavier. And all Dr. On went over to do is just said, I know what he said now. He said, just make your contact. Don't worry where it goes. Just make your contact. And those instincts started to pick up. And I had trouble at the end. So it was really cool. And then how I got to be so good at this was I took my whole academy guys and I said, you guys, you take the top players. I'm going to take the beginners. I'm going to take the 4 and 5 year olds. And for the first year in the academy, that's all I taught. I taught them. We met 3 times a week in the academy. Not many people liked working with me. They liked me maybe, but 3 times a week. Why did I meet? I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a system. Dr. I had the science, but I didn't have a system like you've developed. And so we had to develop one from the inside out, what to say, what not to say, what to say, what not to say, that would trigger these instincts. So every week we were videoing, we were looking at things. We were putting arrows on hips. Maybe that'll turn it. No, that was messing them up. So eventually we got down to this 3 cues for the kids in school. It's going to be position, swing, and move. And we can cover all the basics, position, swing, and move using the devices, the sweet spot trainers. We can trigger all the instincts. And for the high-level players, it's pretty much the same, except we need the pathway for the coach. What the coach wants downloaded, we can download it and strengthen the eye. The instincts pop up. 80% of it is now trained. So that's another circle I just went through. I can't imagine anybody listening to this, but Steve, you have complete privilege to delete all this.
No, this is all great. Let me ask you, you're referring to Dr. On. Is that Benjamin On?
Yes.
Okay, so sounds like you've done a lot of the type of things that I did. I mean, I spent a lot of time with Vic Braden Associates. He used to give me calls periodically, and a lot of people in Vic's circle, I mean, I used to just say, okay, this is Star Wars, meaning it's scientific and space age and over my head. Let me go back also. Did you cross paths working with the eye Harvey Ratner? You know that name?
Yes. Yes.
Because I know Vic, besides working with Benjamin, he used to work with Harvey Ratner.
Yeah. Harvey's really smart guy. And there's different levels of science. And his science is the belief of the eye being a muscle you can train and work with. And from an ophthalmological point of optometry point of view, there's some value in it. From a neurological point of view, it's got to go deeper. And it, again, depends on what thought triggers your eye to do what specific actions. And so Dr. On would pass any inspection from any neurological department in which I took him to, because I had to be sure myself, because I didn't know what he was talking about either. But I just knew instinctively that nobody's ever taught me what he's saying. I've never heard it. And what Harvey does is, it's good. I mean, I don't want to put down anything, especially on a podcast like this. But Vic had the science and the physics, and Dr. On had the science and the neurological side. There was some conversation there. But to have that merge, Dr. On wasn't ready. I don't think the other world was ready. Now we're 25 years later, and now there is a need to say, why is 80% of the balls I'm hitting with great technology, great physics, great science, why is still 80%? And that's scientific fact. The USDA tested, looked at all of our studies. 80% are still mishits. So there's where neurologically it becomes really important. And again, I put myself at the 3rd grade level. I'm not going to operate on anybody's eye. I'm not going to get into the optic nerve. But I do know now what I didn't know. And so the purpose of me coming on here is to share time with you, share this science, get feedback from people like you to be able to see what we're doing. And we're launching this new program, which would be anybody, anywhere around the world can actually get in 10 hours, sweet spot brain training. And that's what's exciting. I hope that people will take a look at that. I hope, Steve, you are, any input that you give us is fantastic. We've got hundreds. Well, actually, let's go back. I went to you for input 10 years ago.
Well, let me ask
So
you.
you're part of it.
Well, thank you. Let me ask you with, all the tennis clubs I visit, they have Billie Jean King eye coaches. So the work you're doing now is in addition to that. That's a training tool, and now you have more systematic rationale.
Yeah, take the iPhone 1. We're at iPhone 20, the version. The model looks the same, but the software is it makes it all the difference. You can hit on a ball on a stick, and you could knock off balls on the sticks. And we have some new ones that are going to have AI and AR technology in them, so that's going to be patent proof. But the real technology is the software, is the vocabulary and the ability to understand how to integrate with the software the difficulty that a coach has in getting those mechanics memorized. You are a leader in it. This is so difficult to get the reps. You're one of the few that says you've got to have the reps. There's no short, quick fix answer. And we know that. Our system, here's a number for you. Our system, in 5 weeks, 6,500, not 65, 6,500 sweet spot hits, solid sweet spot hits are ingrained in the brain in that stroke in 5 weeks, doing 10 minutes a day at home and 30 minutes a week on court. We can accomplish what a coach needs accomplished and have permanent, lasting improvement. 6,500 sweet spot hits is the difference between a Grand Slam winner. When they miss, it triggers a sweet spot hit. When I missed, it triggered a miss hit because I had more miss hits in my brain than I had stored sweet spot hits. So it's called sweet spot brain training for that purpose. With the device, we can get them in. The brain doesn't know any different than on a court or off a court. It's triggering a moving object like the shadow swing, but we're putting the feel of contact. The brain is storing it. We then have them go on the court for 30 minutes a week, and then we meet with them weekly for 15 minutes, and we discuss, okay, show me what you're doing. Okay, now tell me what your problem is. I just got off of one person in Canada. So it's growing. We're going to be bringing coaches in now so we can make this transferable. But it's the best part for me is I would send my student there in a second. Get this thing in your system so when you come back, I can get you faster what you want. So that's kind of the thing that Billie Jean and I want to do. We want to help schools. We want to help coaches. And we want to help students that can't afford coaches. This is going to be far more affordable than I think it comes to like $75 a week. But you get permanent improvement.
Let me go back to reps, and this goes back to your history as a tennis player. I know we could have another podcast with you. I think of someone who you probably played against, Cliff Ritchie, his sister Nancy, and their father George.
Yeah.
San Angelo, Texas, tennis players, small town in West Texas. Tennis players come from everywhere. But like yourself, it just, the reps. But those are things that we could touch upon. I think they're combined, the history of your background in tennis all the way to today. But what about anxiety? I like to tell juniors or parents that relaxation skills are as important or maybe more important than racket skills. Don't you think the sneak a peek, the always shifting the head has a lot to do with they just don't have the confidence, or they're too outcome oriented, they're not in the moment?
That's a great question. Great question. And great conversational point. Why are we so stressed out when we hit a tennis ball? We catch a ball, it's pretty simple. But when you hit a ball, the stress in our brain goes up 10 times. It's ridiculous amount of stress. And so if we can remove that stress neurologically, what's causing it? We want our players relaxed. We want our players in the moment. We want our players not stressed. We want them focused. We don't want them into the future. So why in the heck do we say, keep your head down, keep still? They still keep looking up. Neurologically, If the throwing concept, which is when your target is a distance away, I want to make the ball go from here to there, you look there. There becomes stronger than here. When there is stronger than here, and my mind is now no longer concerned about the contact, but where it's going to go, the stress creates more stress, because now I'm trying to do two things at once. I'm trying to hit the ball here solidly in front of me, but I also want to go cross court. And guess which one wins? Cross court will win, unless you strengthen the muscle for here. And that's what our system does. That is what Dr. On literally did between catching, hitting, and throwing. He designed a device, designed a system, a sweet spot braining training system that triggers here and removes there. And that's why the visualization comes in with Vimo. So we can now quiet the brain, get you the relaxation that you want in that kid neurologically, meaning what they're thinking is more important than what they're feeling. We know that what you think determines what you feel. If you're thinking improperly during the point, then you're going to need a sports psychologist after the point. If you're thinking properly during the point, then you can become your own solution, and your brain will be quiet. The stress goes down enormously. That neural pathway starts to fire. I think it's like 50 million bits to 44 million bytes per second. Some crazy number that actually happens when the instincts take over to hit. The firing down to your hand is so much faster. And I think that's a scientific, third grade level scientific explanation for how do we get these kids to become less stressful. Let's ask them what they're thinking. Well, what are you thinking about? We know we don't want them to think about their technique when they're playing. We know we don't want them to think about their footwork when they're playing. We know we want them to be focused on the ball when they're playing. So they might give it, or they may be thinking about where the ball is going to go.
Or then the score. Are they going to win or lose?
Or the score. So now we get to teach them what should you think. And it's sweet spot brain training. We drill in those 6,500 sweet spot hits, what to think when the ball comes to you, what to think when you get to it, and what to think when you swing. And if you're and for your technique, we teach you to memorize that technique. Well, you do it best. Memorize it in a way that they can memorize it fast. We now are just making a more affordable way, which is you can now do it at home. The same thing that we need them to do at court. Do it at home. You can do it faster. You can we get 1,000 solid sweet spot hits in a week at the end of 6 weeks. And believe me, it took 10 years to figure out how many, Steve. Do we need 20,000? Do we need 10,000 hours? No, we need 10 hours. We need an hour a week at home and a half hour a week on the court, and we can get that built in, and now you can go play your matches.
Lenny, I know you're pressed for time. Huh? That is cool. Let me ask you two questions.
No, I'm good. I pushed till 1:30, so I'm good.
Oh, okay, great. I was the question I have on my mind right now is usually it's asked at the end, but if you just answer it now, how do people get a hold of you? How can they get in touch with Lenny Schloss and what you're doing?
Well, if you ask my kids, they say you have to go to Mars because he doesn't live on this planet anymore. But the real, that's actually true. That's what they said. Yeah, I think for those that want to know more about sweet spot brain training, Lenny, Lenny at the THE next word EYECOACH.com. Lenny at dicoach.com. I'll spell it again. Lenny at, and then it's two E's in the middle. All one word. THEEYECOACH.com. Coach.com. That'd be the easiest. And the team that's ready to roll out, we only have a limited amount that we can take in this next run because we do them very personally at this point. But it's really cool, and I love talking about and helping people. So anytime.
Here's another question. A friend of mine, I just happened to be telling him that I was talking to you today on the phone. He said, hey, my brother worked for him. It was Luke Wickham told me that, his brother Jay, who played at Northern Iowa.
Yeah.
And he said to ask you about being part of the longest match in the history of tennis. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. Speaking of game changing, after Wimbledon, you are invited to Newport, Rhode Island, the Hall of Fame, where Jimmy Van Allen at the time was running what's called the Van Allen tiebreaker system. We all know what the tiebreaker is today, but we didn't have it in those days, so we could play matches for ever and ever and ever. And Jimmy Van Allen was a very successful diplomat gentleman who ran this tournament. We're an ascot, and they're all very formal. You got the benefit of coming over and playing this Van Allen tiebreaker system, which was literally tiebreakers instead of sets. And they were 7-point or 10-point, I don't remember. And so we did that, and then the tournament began, and we were a high-ranked doubles team, so we were on the center court. And the match began at, 1 o'clock first day and ended the next day. We were 7.5 hours to complete this one match, and because there's no tiebreaker. And so the first set was normal, 3-6, since I lost the longest doubles match. Second set was 49-47.
Wow.
And the third set, they closed this out at 23-21. So what do you think happened a year later? Because Jimmy Van Allen had been for years, 10 years at least, saying we're never going to be able to grow this sport to where it is today if we continue to do that. Television, you don't want to do that. You know, basketball games have a certain time. And so there you go. I was a part of another history-making event, losing the longest doubles match. Now, whether that was actually the turning point, I don't know. But whether I'm in the longest, whether I'll be forever for my grandkids in the Guinness Book of Records, that's a yes. There'll be no doubles match 2 out of 3 sets that will ever go 149 or 147 games.
Yeah, I looked it up. You played against Dickie Dell, Donald Dell's brother. Dick Leach, and then you played with Tom Mosier. Is that right?
Right. He was my doubles partner at the University of Tennessee, and we went on the circuit after that.
Describe the tennis boom. And so the tiebreaker really, to me, launched the tennis boom because it put tennis, as you said, in a time capsule. Then it could be on TV. And there was back in the day before there was PBS, there was just CBS, ABC, NBC. And there was times where there'd be tennis on 2 out of the 3 channels. Why don't you, for our listeners, just tell them what comes to your mind as far as tennis in the 70s, when tennis really took off in America?
Tennis in the 70s, like I said, my past thinking is clogged. But I think, Steve, what was so not interesting or not newsworthy is the obvious. And the obvious was, what else could you do? You know, it was a cool sport to do. It was a free sport, and in those days you didn't have to worry about where you were. You could be out till 6 or 7 at night, so to speak. You know, it wasn't that dangerous, so you could get your practice in, and so it was. And kids in those days were not as immediately trained for gratification as they were today. So it was a natural marriage in my mind, thinking backwards, and you may tell me what you think, but I think those are probably the factors that allowed tennis to okay, here's a void. We can step in. We don't have to be on a golf course for 100 hours. It's affordable. It's recreational. We can put them up anywhere, and our kids can go get some athletic stuff, and it's good for them, and it's a sport for a lifetime, and so it'll be really good, and they'll stick out there. So kids were willing to do the hard work that today is not part of our what's it called? DNA.
With tennis in Baltimore, that was certainly not a hot spot for tennis. You mentioned Pam Shriver being from there, and obviously there's players from everywhere. But your initial several years in tennis, I mean, you really probably didn't play outside of Baltimore, correct? Just in your local area? Played anybody and everybody?
As a kid, you mean me as a kid? Well, me as a kid at 15, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm realizing what you asked. At 15, I got good fast, and then a few businessmen got together and said, this kid's good, and flew me out to California to get out of Baltimore.
Okay.
And played over in California for a month or 6 weeks. At 16 or 15, it must have been 16 because I still couldn't. No, at 16, yeah. And I played those tournaments, and I did all right. And the last tournament I think I remember there was the National Hardcourt Championships in Arcadia, California. Yeah, I am remembering. And this young kid by the name of Stan Smith was the guy I was going to play, and I lost. It was a close match. I don't remember, but I actually went around. I didn't have a car, but the guy I was staying with had a motorcycle, and so here I am, 16 years old, going around Southern California on the freeways to my tournaments with my racket bag on my back and by myself, and staying in this guy's apartment. And but when I came back, I felt like I was really experienced. So I did get out of Baltimore for a little bit, and then I only had one more year left, and I went to the University of Tennessee. But Baltimore, I think, was typical, Steve, of places that kids want to do something, and the parents want to do something. And tennis it's so many things you get out of the sport. I didn't get that much because all I felt was my failures. But if you're got around the right coaches, then you can really learn from your mistakes. Once you get better at your mistakes, and then ultimately once you start correcting your mistakes, you've learned a life lesson.
In Baltimore, Don Candy, an Aussie, he ended up in Baltimore. Did you work with him at all?
Yes. I didn't really work with him. I'd gotten pretty good by then, so I was coming back in between stints, and he was there. But he did influence me in his human touch. Again, like I mentioned, my parents are great, but they just weren't around for the hugging and loving and, hey, you're okay. There's something about Don. I felt like he was like almost a father figure. And you know what? He was like 20 years, 30 years older than me. And I'd come back, and sometimes he actually still beat me. And I was big, not big, fast, but fast and strong, and look at me. And he was conniving and had terrible strokes, but just could jump me up and get me. And I didn't ever mind it, because every time I finished, I was just glad to be around him.
Yeah, the Aussies, obviously he was a very good player, but not one of the Hopman elite Davis Cup champions year after year. But it's amazing what the Aussies from the 60s, late 50s and 60s, what they accomplished in tennis. What about Kalamazoo? That was on clay at one point, where the 18s was best of 5. What are your recollections of Kalamazoo? Did you play Kalamazoo?
No.
Really?
But I do have a relation of the Aussies, and I was invited to be their punching bag and play with them. And I'm trying to think who was there. Then Ray Ruffles and Bill Bowery and Neil Frazier was the captain. And I remember going out one night, and I never drank, I never did anything. I was doing double knee jumps and kangaroo jumps and whatever. And I went out, and they were early, and they said, "Yeah, come on." And they're all having such a good time, drinking and having fun and having their beers. And I sat at the other table because I don't drink, and they come like, come on over. And, I did, but the experience of working out with them was also really cool. I like that.
Party hard, practice hard. Neil Frazier, who won Wimbledon, I fortunate to see him playing seniors, and I'll never forget him missing his shot and yelling out, "I can believe it." Instead of yelling out, I can't believe it.
I can't believe it. Right. Yeah, that's good. What was your Steve? What memory do you have most that got you so involved with coaching tennis?
Well, thanks for asking. I am not really from the tennis world. I grew up, 10, 12 miles from the Canadian border into a hockey family. And, I also am a product of the tennis boom. When the tiebreaker came into place, everybody started playing tennis. I thought a tennis court was for street hockey. And we just didn't play. And then I was at a boarding school. Actually, even before that, back in the day, everybody turned 16. And I would have loved to have kept going to a hockey school in Canada that I used to go to, but my parents, my father, I was going off to a prep school. I remember said, now you have to learn what it's like on the other side of the tracks. And I got a job in the Adirondack Mountains washing dishes, and my cabin was right by 2 tennis courts, and they weren't used very often. I often think about it. I watched these counselors that were there to teach tennis, and I thought they were just fantastic, but I had no exposure to tennis. And then from there, I went to a prep school, and right outside my window were tennis courts, but still I had really no connection to tennis. But my senior year, and I had senioritis, they reinstated a rule at this prep school. You had to play 3 sports every season. And they were letting the hockey players do, dry land training for hockey. So basically we were just fooling around the old gym playing street hockey. And I was a small guy. I got out of Pee Wee football, and the older brothers recommended I run cross country. So the AD, the athletic director, said, "Hey, Smith, why don't you run the 2 mile?" So I signed up for tennis, and I fell in love with it. But then I also felt like I had my own ticket in tennis, where I wasn't going to make the NHL in hockey. And I played in college. First year, I had an operation on my ankle, and my oldest brother was studying hockey systems. So I said, and I actually met somebody you probably know, Dave Eddy. And Dave Eddy, he invented the 10 tube, the thing where you pick up tennis balls. And I used to hitchhike everywhere. And then I was exposed to it. He was a tennis pro in upstate New York. And I said I was intrigued by learning how to play. And then I went to Boca Raton, and proud of the fact that I went out, got on an airplane, didn't know anybody, and I became the perennial tennis bum at Boca Raton. But I think that helped me out because, I didn't get into tennis. I was told I had to learn to play to teach. And then once I had and I'm embarrassed to say it now because people don't play open tournaments. But you embellish your bio, and I was top 20 in Florida. I was 19 as far as being an amateur in Florida. But so I went there to learn how to play, but I wasn't learning as a 9-year-old. And then I kept reading and listening and going here and going there. So I really, back in the day, I think, okay, you love sports and you'd become a PE major. And I didn't really want to do that. But like my older brothers, the Vietnam War, I remember we used to all sit around. You would have been part of that. You sit around the TV, and your birthday is pulled out of a hat, and I remember they dropped the draft. So I later went back to school, but I withdrew from school and had this mission to go become a tennis teaching pro. So my background is a little bit different that way, but because I got into it I knew I had to learn to play, but I got into it to be a tennis teacher, tennis coach.
That's rare, to me, because I think if you ask 9,999 out of 10,000 coaches, I don't think the coaching was the stimulus. I think in my experience so far, not that it's a blanket, but it's a credit to you in the respect that many coaches became coaches for different reasons than wanting to coach. And it became something that was easy or natural. And hey, the natural step, I'll not just go in this direction. But I don't think they started out playing to become a coach. They started playing to become a great player.
Yeah, that's a good point. Number one, I think goes back to the question that would be true with your timetable. As an American kid, it was a close fraternity. And when I was a kid, there was 2 Americans in the NHL. And the Americans weren't really looked at until the Miracle on Ice in 1980. But I remember hearing John Lloyd say this. He's a little bit younger than you. The people from that era, or even go back a few more years to your group, is when you got into tennis, you just got in it for the love of the game. Because you weren't going to make big money. Even the baseball, football players, they were making a very good living, but people from yesteryear, when they got into tennis, it was just for love of the game.
Yeah. I think it's probably, and 10% is an immense gratification from winning and succeeding and doing something well. And if you can, so the school teachers today, I'm just prophesizing, if you're in education, you're doing it for the love of the game. And we were pretty much, as players, doing it for the love of the game and the opportunity to maybe, excel at something that we felt would be athletically worth achieving, right? You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, with I asked you about where you're shortstop because usually the really athletic players put at shortstop. I mean, one of your partners, Billie Jean King, we do a drill called shortstop, and we ground out a tennis ball and see if kids can just catch it and then pretend they're throwing the ball to first base. And it's abysmal. I mean, unfortunately, with computers or iPhones, whatever, kids, it's like, hey, you can't catch the ball. Now, in your day, my day, if you couldn't catch the ball, the PE teachers were handing out internal scars. But, then you go a little bit deeper, and her brother was, I think, a pitcher for San Francisco, Randy Muffet. Her father was a fireman. Her mother was a seamstress. No money, and just started at a public park. And, we need to go back to that. We think we really need to find a way to make tennis less costly. And what you're talking about, and you could elaborate a little bit more upon that, and we could sign off with how people can do things on their own, how they can get the reps on their own. And, we're getting to the point where lessons are $100 an hour. Then when people live up north and there's indoor courts, it's like crazy. And we're killing it. We're killing it. But tell us a little bit more about doing the work off the court. I guess we could end it there.
Yeah. What I would like to, before I pass off on you, is that this is your podcast, but what we need more of, Steve, is more, and I think it's in every stage of life today. We're getting skewed to values that are not lasting values, and I'm getting on my little horse for about another second because of you, which is why when you asked, I said yes, it would be an honor. Is that there's no doubt when you meet you and people like you gravitate to them. But why do you gravitate to them? And for your audience, I'm not getting paid to say any of this stuff. There's a truth in being truthful. There's a truth in being heartfelt. Why do people go to Arthur Ashe? Why do they gravitate to Billie Jean? Because their values are grounded in making the world better. And so compliments to you, Steve, and compliments to your success with this podcast, and compliments to the people that are listening. Because at the end of the day, we are not making ourselves better from something, and we are benefiting at the cost of something, then we really are going in the wrong direction. So my partnership with Billie Jean is completely grounded in why I do stuff, why I'm doing it, what I'm doing. It's cost me a lot in terms of the financial side, but it's not cost me a penny in terms of being able to talk to you. So compliments to you, Steve. Keep doing what you're doing in putting your heart out there, because that's how we are going to turn things around and the world becomes a little more spiritually based instead of me based. So I got off the track there. I know you asked me a question. I completely forgot it.
Well, just to elaborate about the, and I appreciate your kind words with, and then your words about what Arthur Ashe, Billie King stand for. How's it go? If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. But the number of reps that someone needs, and that it's not, if you study tennis, obviously there's so many players. It's not like they were homeschooled and playing 6 hours a day. And if you just talk about the balance of what you can do off court and on court with reps.
Got it. Yeah. The brain is a magical piece of the puzzle. That's why Billie Jean and Arthur jumped on this. And I'm sticking with it. What we can do now, what we used to do 50 years ago, night and day. In the last 10 years, we've perfected a system that works at every level for anyone, so they can get the quality reps they need, 80% at home. You need about 5,000. You can get 1,000 a week with a minimum practice and be able to accelerate at a much faster rate. It's affordable. Our units, the system itself is it's very inexpensive. The training program that we're offering, which is called Sweet Spot Brain Training, if somebody just wanted to practice, let me make it even easier. If you say, you know what, my biggest problem is I just got the greatest lesson. I'm so good at that. I don't have time to practice. My kid goes to school, he does this, or I'm working on this. I can't get to the court to practice. We've got your answer. It's Billie Jean King's iCoach. You go to that website. It's Billie Jean King's iCoach. It's perfect practice. There's 16 drills that you can now do for your forehand and your backhand, integrating in whatever the lessons you want. You don't have to go to the court. You're building your eye in so that you'll correct yourself. You become self-correcting in about 4 to 5 hours of practice, an hour a week, 10 minutes a day. Go get those machines. They're guaranteed to give you the reps that you need between lessons so that your skills that you have been learning can be perfected and you're hitting the center of your strings much higher. Even our study of the first 30 minutes was a 43% increase in solid hits. But that was the first 30 minutes. You still got to put the reps in to make it last. If you say, no, so that's Billie Jean King's iCoach system. The second phase is use my email address. What we're launching now are for those people that want to get to the next level in their strokes and they're working with their coaches, or they don't have a coach. We have a very affordable coaching system where 80% of your lessons you're going to be doing at home on Zoom with our Sweet Spot trainer that you'll be training on. And then you'll be given a prescription every week for practice so that stroke becomes permanently improved. And Steve, I'd love your opinion about this. Our KPI, our key performance indicator, is only one thing. And I'd like your opinion on it. Our key performance indicator is how fast can you correct yourself in a match, like a Grand Slam winner. When they miss it, doesn't break them. They come right back and they can correct the next ball. Our job with each stroke is to get you at that level in our stroke program, where you are self-correcting during the point like a Grand Slam winner at a 1-to-1 ratio. Typically, people start out at 4 to 5 to 1. They miss hit. They make a solid hit, and they miss it, and they miss 5, 6, 7, or they go all the way down to 2. When we finish with that stroke will be self-correcting. After 6,500 hits, plus your on-court training, in 5 weeks, you will have permanent. We're going to give a 3-year lasting improvement in that, as long as you practice about 15 minutes a month to keep it going. So that's the answer to reps. That's the answer to time. It's the answer to money. It's, for me, the answer to my personal goal, which is no child left behind, in respects that I wish I had known why I miss it. I wish I had the 6,500 reps. I wish I'd had Steve Smith's foundation or Vic Braden's foundation. My techniques were average. I got a lot better out of them because of my guttiness, but I really could have had if I had the foundation, Steve, if you had been, say, Lenny, will you come over and just join me for a while? We could have been on tour by now.
I know Steve Denton's been a guest of ours. He says the same thing, that and it's really, it's who I've been trained by. Teaching's information transfer. I was just fortunate to hang around with some people who really knew what they were doing.
Don't stop doing it. All we're going to do is fill in the blanks with practice. Get the reps in, quality reps, not 1,000 reps where 80% are miss hits, which is unfortunately what the number is, but we can reverse that. So did I answer all the questions?
No, fantastic. You get an A+. For our listeners, there's two types of people. Number one, you're all in, and number two, you're not all in. And Lenny Schloss is all in. But I'd love to get you on another time, and
we'll do it.
Just so many things from. I really love the character tennis, and to hear you talk about the old days. And I know
Yeah.
I've read so much about, and I even had a chance to watch so many of the people that you played against. And one of our longtime students, associates, Dave Anderson, who certainly has some Billie Jean King coaches out in Dallas, Brookhaven. I know you've been there. He says what we need to do to improve tennis is go with the title from a movie, Back to the Future. There's a lot of things from the old days that we need to bring back to the new days. But I think it's great that you're on both sides, and with the technological side that you're dealing with. It's great. It's all great.
In this case, follow the science and start from the neck up. If it's not working from the neck down, then get in touch with us. Again, it's Lenny at theicoach.com. I'm out there. I don't need to I'm not pushing this from any point of view, except that if you care and you're listening on this podcast, then there's new information. Billie Jean is my partner. And the reason we are doing this is we want this out, not for us to keep it, but for it to be for all coaches, all schools, all kids, to be able to have these devices for sweet spot brain training is what we think is going to be a giant step forward in getting the reps that everybody is trying to get, and not have the coach standing there right next to you. Am I doing it right? These machines actually dictate to you that you have to do it right. You feel it every single time. So, Steve, it's come a long way from when Dave Anderson had them. We had the machines out, but we really did not have the software or the programs to support it. So, unfortunately, you live and learn, and fortunately, we have learned. So,
Well, no, it's been an update. It's been an update, and that's what we need to do is go up, up, up. But Lenny, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
You're awesome. Thanks for having me on, and bye, everybody. If I can help, call me.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Lenny.
Right. Bye-bye.
All right, bye. All right, Lenny Schloss, great guy. Let me go through a few things, and we'll wrap it up here. I heard a golfer say not too long ago, you lift your head to see how you just hit a bad shot. Phraseology, don't sneak a peek. The brain's a fifth of the second head of the hand. So for every adjustment, there's a counter adjustment. So when the eyes go, and obviously, Lenny, there's so many things reviewed from this podcast. Type of thing I would ask junior tennis players is, what did Lenny say when I said that Knoxville is a really beautiful place? He said, well, I just saw the tennis courts. Maybe he said, I just saw the tennis court and a few classrooms. But when the eyes go, the head goes, and inch for inch, the head's the heaviest part of the body. And obviously, Lenny has, like all of us listening to this podcast, has so much respect for Braden. When you shift your own head, you disturb the flight pattern of your racket head. You shorten your hitting zone when you shift your head. You can get on YouTube, and I think that the rhythm counting that Lenny taught, I think obviously very humble guy, but it's like when we had Jim Lair on, I was very excited. Before we interviewed Jim, we had dedicated 2 podcasts to Jim, and Jim had listened to them. And we went back to the old days when he was on the court and doing things like making kids play each other they would just switch rackets. And then we all learned from here, there, and everywhere. He would pour water over the kids' grips. Jimmy Connors used to do that before a match. He just used a leather grip, and he would pour water over the leather grip and then start really trying to dry the grip as much as possible. And they said, why are you doing that? And Jimmy was just trained to say, when it counts, my grip's going to be wet. And, those are the pearls of wisdom that I really love. Bill Tim, very successful tennis teacher. You see young Ben Shelton, Brian Shelton. Brian was a disciple of Bill Tim. He was, I think, the voice he was the voice of the USPTA for years. He used to talk about Borg and Federer, how they just keep their heads so still. So keep the head still, not shifting the head with so many things. I think another key word that Lenny, besides reps, there's so many key words, but instincts. For years we've said I plus I equals I. I to the third power of it. Information, ideas, and insights equal instincts. And you want to do reps. You want to repeat the basic movement over and over and over again so much that when you start to compete and the competitive juices are flowing, his basics turn into instincts. And you just fundamentals. And the great coaches from every sport is over and over again. I think the visualization would be another key word. I'll just sign off with that. I know nothing about basketball, but when basketball players stand at a foul line and it's a standstill shot, palm to their target, the technique from one player to the next is so similar. We always tease and say, well, maybe not with Shaq. Or even years ago, Wilt Chamberlain, who at times threw his foul shots underhand. But that's such a key part of basketball, and it's palm to the target. We have a short video clip where the statement is basketball and tennis are so much the same because your target is small and elevated. But when people are on a tennis court, they don't understand their target. They think the target is low and large. not small and elevated. But to me, when a basketball player releases, I just think the ones that are so successful is that phrase, I got this, I got this. And they're wired, like he was talking about. They're not thinking outcome. They're not thinking score. It's built in. It becomes just their internal wiring that this is what the arc of the shot, this is what the measurement of the shot over and over again. And they're just so consistent. I think also too, a phrase, he talked about balance, that Welby Van Horn used to say that you have to become so athletic. You're on balance when you're in an off-balance position. I think so many things, but bonus is that he was a multiple sport athlete, and to come from the baseball diamond, I did get a kick out of when he said that, why is there so much stress between catching a ball and hitting a ball? I know you get in the Hall of Fame if you hit baseball 1 out of 3 times, but I never really was into baseball, but I played so much that everybody played in my day. I could look like a baseball player. I could catch, I could throw. I couldn't hit on either side, but I'd get up there and swing left hand and swing right hand. And people say, are you a switch hitter? I said, no, I can't hit either way. But with that, stress levels, and then the anxiety today, you talked about the work ethic today. So I just said I was going to make one more point, but now it's rapid fire. But anyway, podcast 140. Some people's serves go 140 miles per hour, not too many. But I hope that our listeners, I talked to someone the other day who's listened to all our podcasts, and we're flattered by that. And I do know when people are listening to podcasts, I tell our junior tennis players, really they got to get their schoolwork done, but when they're listening to podcasts, once again, you hear it over and over again with our efforts, what we like to call it a contribution to tennis. You're not listening to quote unquote Steve Smith stuff. Our connection is with people like Lenny Schloss, and just the takeaways, that flyaway ball. To me, that's a phrase that I stole from Lenny. All good coaches are thieves. No, don't look at the flyaway ball. The original Billie Jean King coach, I think perhaps everybody listening to this has seen one, is that just keep your head still. And Brady used to say, there's only one ball and you have it. It's on your side of the net. Anyway, thank you, Lenny Schloss. Thanks, listeners. And I hope that you got something out of this podcast. I certainly did. Thanks.